This is the ICDB special on Kakaki the African Voice. My name is Sehila Zaman.
And I am Bengal Bashala. In Nigeria, like in other jurisdictions, gender-based violence remains a challenge that significantly constrains women's autonomy and opportunities. Conflicts in Nigeria's northeast geopolitical zone has further contributed to a steep rise in violence targeted against women and children by the Boko Haram.
On today's ICDB special, we'll be discussing the impact of forced and domestic migration on gender-based violence.
Joining us on the show is Ms. Paola Pace, Deputy Chief of Mission of the International Organization of Migration in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you for inviting me.
To open our discussion, what is your assessment on gender-based violence as a result of conflicts and forced migration?
In fact, there's a very strong correlation between all these factors. So conflict actually results in forced migration. So people are forced to leave their place of habitual residence to look for safety. And when they do so, they are often at risk of gender-based violence. There's been recently a meeting at the Security Council in July 2023 in which UN representative but also representative of states have highlighted the increased risk of gender-based violence related to conflict. And Nigeria, unfortunately, is not safe from that. And we have seen a lot of cases of abduction, early and forced marriages, violence against girls and women that have really long-lasting consequences on the victim, first of all, and then the family and communities.
Thank you very much. Now, when you take a look at all those IDP camps, you realize a lot of women and girls are at risk of being exploited. What intervention is the IOM and the UN exploring to safeguard women and girls from being exploited and abused?
That's a very good question. And it's very important that you run it as the children. You are our future. So for us, it's very important to work with the community as a whole. What the UN, the International Organization for Migration, do in IDPs camps specifically is working on from the recruitment of their own personnel and the personnel of service provider to direct intervention, finally to guidelines and coordinating groups, because we cannot have an impact on zero tolerance and elimination of gender-based violence alone. So it's very important to be transparent in the recruitment, to onboard your own staff, for them to be the actor of prevention of sexual violence and exploitation, as well as direct intervention in terms of prevention, acting on the root causes such as poverty, gender inequality, but also the mitigating the factors that exacerbate gender-based violence, like overcrowding in IDP camps, as well as taking care of the victim from a legal redress perspective, from socio-economic intervention, and from empowering the people, women and girls in particular, but not only.
Thank you so much for that, ma'am. Gender-based violence is a long-term challenge that we have all been facing throughout the world. In recent years, especially in Nigeria, in recent years, especially in Nigeria, there's been a rise in cases of gender-based violence in child trafficking. How children are exploited in child labor activities and how they are falling victim to cases of gender-based violence related issues. What do you think can be done to curb the menace?
Awareness raising is the first thing. It's exactly the job you are doing today, because there's this tendency to see children as an investment to lift us out of poverty. That shouldn't be the case. It's not the child's responsibility. That's a family responsibility to lift the child out of poverty, not the other way around. So it's very important. The place for a child is in school in order to really grow as an adults of tomorrow and contribute to society, not from an early age. So yes, we have seen an increase, and I've seen it not only in Nigeria, but I've seen an increase of trafficking of children for domestic work, forced begging, also from conflict areas to big cities like Abuja, Lagos, other places, where then children are used by families, affluent families, in order to take care of their own children. But the consequences on this child are horrible. Not only in terms of sexual violence, which is often a consequence, but also is a lost life. A child is taking care of another child, doesn't have the possibility to go to school, sees another child growing with affection, with love, and he or she is left behind. So the consequences are tremendous. I've seen that in other contexts, other countries, for example Tunisia, where I was before, in which a lot has been done to absolutely stop the selling and the trafficking of children for domestic work and forced begging. So we really need to do more collectively for that. And you can see it when you walk along the streets of big cities. You see affluent family with their own children followed by a domestic worker child, and that's not, we can change. I understand there are cultural practices, maybe it has been like that in the past, but it cannot continue because it has huge consequences on the life of our future generations.
Thank you, Ma. So a lot of women and children who have been victims of these cases have been affected economically, psychologically, socially, and even politically as well, when the men don't allow them to participate in other activities. So can you briefly tell us what has worked in supporting survivors of forced migration in terms of the economic and psychosocial interventions?
That's a good question. Really what works is a human rights person-centered approach. So the girl, the woman, if they are the victim, the boy, if he's a victim or transgender, they have to be at the center of the intervention. And the intervention has to be complete. So it has to target that individual, the victim, the survivor, but also the community. For the community to participate in the self-esteem, in the reconstruction of the self-esteem of the person, and then also activities that act on the causes of the violence against this individual. So also socio-economic activities like the provision of startup kits for the person to have in activities, socio-economic activities that can lift them out of poverty and that can act on the root causes why they became a victim in the first place. So it's really an important fact, like it's important to work as many actors as possible to really, and private sector has also a very important role to play in order to lift people and children in particular out of poverty.
Thank you so much, Ma. Well, as citizens, is there any way that we can support the government and also help other international organizations to prevent the forced migration of other people?
Certainly, because forced migration, as I said, is a consequence. It's not the cause per se. So if you have children who don't have any other opportunity and they have to lift their family out of poverty, or they are alone and they beg, they cannot go to school, then when they become older, they will not have the possibility to find a job because they are analphabet, and they risk to then to be recruited in Boko Haram fractions or to become part of a bandit group. So then that creates more conflict and again more displacement and again more gender-based violence. So it's a vicious circle. So yes, everybody of us has a responsibility to prevent all this from happening, to make sure that children are in school, to make sure that we say no to domestic work of children, to forced begging, that we say no to early and forced marriages. That's very important because the consequences are horrible, so we really need to help the community to shift the mentality. And that's exactly what you're doing today, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Well, apart from us asking people to find out if they're being forcibly migrated and even having surveys, is there any way that survivors can find help themselves?
For sure, like being ready to restart from scratch, like working on their self-esteem, but they need to be supported. It's going to be difficult for a person who has undergone such terrible violence to be able to rebuild his or her life without support. So it takes a community to change things.
Thank you so much, Ma. Well, earlier you stated that there was a conference being held in July last year, that they're finding solutions to reduce the forced migration. So do you have any idea when this will take place and how citizens can prepare to also help? visit?
But the conference of the Security Council happened in July 2023. These are opportunities for member states to come together to understand that this phenomenon is increasing in many contexts, and more needs to be done in terms of prevention, in terms of redress. The legal system has a role to play as well. Compensation for victims, states have to put in their budget. Also, they have to budget for prevention work. But as you well said, we all need to contribute in terms of shifting the mentality. One man can is also important. Men can help stopping gender-based violence against girls and women. So it's important to have these champions. So these meetings, if you like, are opportunity to raise awareness, but also to come together as different actors to change things.
What are your last words to perpetrators of gender-based violence, especially in displaced communities?
They need to understand the consequences of what they have done and stop that for the future. I've had the privilege to also live with women victims of gender-based violence, and I've seen how much they've lost their trust, their self-esteem, and this is not good for the perpetrator either. It's like a society in which women cannot express themselves is a society that has no future. So it's really gender equality is good for everybody. So really what I tell the perpetrator is repent, do something about it, become a champion of gender equality and zero tolerance to gender-based violence.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
We have been talking to Ms. Paola Peace, from the Deputy Chief of Mission of the International Organization of Migration in Nigeria, on the impact of forced and domestic migration on gender-based violence. Thank you, ma'am, for taking our time to be part of our show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And a big thank you to our dear viewers for tuning in.
That's all we have for you today on the ICDB special on Kakaki. Tomorrow is the last day of the ICDB special on Kakaki. We hope that you will take time to join us as we celebrate the International Children's Day of Broadcasting in Nigeria, looking at ending gender-based violence.
This program has been brought to you by Playback Nigeria and AIT. If you want to learn how to perform, how theatre can make an impact in your life, or how to build your confidence, you can join us for our weekly improv acting classes in Abuja. You can email us at office@playbacknigeria.com or call 090-7280-8091.
If you want to know how you can support or be part of our advocacy to end gender-based violence, you can check our work on our website at www.playbacknigeria.com.
Until we come your way tomorrow, my name is Tehila Zaman, and it has been a pleasure to host you with
Binga Bashala. Over.